The woes for Beyond Meat continue. We'd like to focus on Beyond Meat because they are possibly the highest profile of the fake meat plant alternatives. They certainly get the most press. They've had the most presence in the fast food industry. Shortly thereafter, you'll find Impossible Burgers, who tend to make the news far less often, and I don't know what the difference is between their products, if one tastes better than the other, and if one is less harmful to your diet than the other. I don't know. I advocate staying away from their products in general, as they are highly processed and not fit for human consumption, in my personal opinion. You are free to make your own judgment call on that, of course. But their woes continue. Beyond Meats does. In fact, I would expect to see this across the plant-based fake meat alternative spectrum, across the marketplace. You're going to see this kind of bad news being repeated, probably without as much fanfare, partially because we are clearly in economically less than ideal times right now, and they're probably not getting any better anytime soon, unfortunately. At least not until the attitude of our rulers changes when it comes to how the economy is managed, and if it should be managed at all. Let you debate that one in the comments yourself if you so would like to. Let's turn to our story, which comes to us from ABC News, which provides us this scintillating headline. Beyond Meat cuts non-productive workforce by 19% as plant-based meat demand weakens. The reduction of this... They have a typo in their headline there. The reduction of is part of a broader corporate review, company says. Hire a proofreader, ABC News, please. But note it's the non-productive workforce. Now, I have nothing against anybody who, is losing their job there. I don't wish unemployment on anybody. Been there, done that. I know how hard it is. I'm not anti-worker, any of that. It is worth noting that this is the non-productive workforce. This is going to be your office personnel. And while some of us could possibly hope that it might be the higher ranking people who brought this misery onto themselves, it's probably going to be office personnel lower down the ladder. That's just probably how it's going to be, unfortunately. Because if golden parachutes were being handed out at that company, that would make major headlines. And every one of your carnivore influencers would be talking about that. Because some of us had wondered last year, when we all started reporting on their woes, if Beyond Meat was going to manage to survive through 2023. Now we ask the question, will it survive through the end of 2024? Well, this time next year, when most of the rest of the news cycle is being dominated by partisan politics and an election going on, at least in America, will any of us be talking about Beyond Meat? Will they still be here? Will they be making the news? That's something we're all going to have to ask. And I'm hoping that the answer is, nothing against the people who work there, but I would be updating their LinkedIn accounts and their resumes if they had the opportunity and maybe start looking for work elsewhere in some other maybe related industry. And I say that because of this. This right here, this part of the article says it all. Quote, U.S. demand for plant-based meat has plummeted this year. U.S. retail dollar sales of fresh meat alternatives like sausage and burgers were down 21.5% this year through October 8th. According to Circana, a market research firm. Frozen plant-based meat sales, including items like tenders and nuggets, were down 6%. Brown has said that the plant-based meat sales were hurt by high inflation, which sent some shoppers back to cheaper animal meats. Plant-based meat is also fighting perceptions that it's overly processed and unhealthy, stoked in part by ads released by rival food companies. Beyond Meat plans to release its third quarter earnings on November 8th. In the meantime, it said it expects revenue of $75 million for the July-September period. That would be 8.5% lower than the same period a year ago. Beyond Meat is also said it now expects full-year net revenue in the range of $330 million to $340 million, which would be lower by 19 to 20% than the previous year. Wall Street has expected full-year sales of $365 million, according to analysts polled by FactSet. End quote. Part of it's the perception that it's ultra-processed. That's good news. But it's worth noting that the reduction in sales of plant-based meat alternatives was far less among the tenders and nuggets. This is the fake chicken. How many of you remember in your previous pre-carnivore, pre-keto, pre-clean eating life that if you tried any of the plant-based meat alternatives, that the fake chicken tasted the best? For whatever reason, it's a lot easier to make things pass like chicken, or even if it doesn't really taste like chicken. They still taste, quote, good, at least in a hyper-palatable sense. That is not advocacy for eating them. Please don't eat that stuff. Please don't. But how many of you remember that? And I think that's the key here to understanding part of their woes. Beef and lamb and the other ruminant animals are superfoods. They're legitimately superfoods. And for whatever reason, it's hard to duplicate that flavor in a fake sense. This came to mind when I was initially reading this article yesterday, that back in like 1990, McDonald's stopped using actual beef tallow in their fryers. They then went to their flavor wizards in the lab and got them to make flavoring additives to make the French fries taste like beef. They actually apparently still use that stuff 30-something years later. But if you were to take McDonald's French fries, if you were to take somebody who had been a veteran McDonald's employee who also knew how to take and prepare the potatoes and had them cook them exactly the way McDonald's did before then and after, and have side by side, I would bet you money. I don't make bets very, very often, especially cash bets, but I would bet money that they would taste different, noticeably different. People who have eaten McDonald's for a long time, back in those days and still do today, and are somehow still with us, will note that they don't taste the same. And I think that might be part of what's going on here. Beef is a flavor that is hard to duplicate. It just is. Fake beef. How many times have you ever eaten like a highly processed thing that had an flavor additive to it that was supposed to be vegetarian to make it, but they were trying to make it taste like beef? How many times have you ever done that? Processed foods are loaded with that stuff. And it's one of the reasons why once you separate yourself from eating ultra processed foods for long enough, your taste buds start to change. Have you noticed that yet? Those of you who are relatively new to carnivore or keto, have you noticed that the longer you eat clean, the more flavorful your food becomes, and the less you need that other stuff to the point where you now don't want it really? It's food for thought. Those plant-based, the one time I had one of those plant-based patties a few years ago before I went carnivore, like right before I ended up going carnivore, I think it may have been part of the psychological push to get me to go, was I tried it may have been a Beyond Burger or Impossible, whatever Carl's Jr. was having at the time a few years ago. I could barely finish the thing. I didn't have a lot of money, so I felt compelled to finish the thing. But it didn't taste like beef. It tasted weird. And I'd had, Boca burgers and those kind of fake plant patties in my past, and they all tasted significantly better. And weirdly, they looked more like food than the Beyond patties do. So yeah, they try to say that they're not ultra processed, but they are. We know they are. All you have to do is look at the product. What plant does that look like? It doesn't. But it's a trade secret, of course, what they do to it, to get it to look that way, to taste vaguely meaty. But I'm curious, what other factors do you think it is? Do you think it's really the economy and people are going for cheaper meats? Because, I'm sure when the ag reports come out, we're going to see demand for pork and chicken have gone up a lot because the state of the economy and state of inflation and the demand for beef has gone down. But I would also bet that a lot of people are doing what my family is doing, which is eating out far less often and spending that money much more efficiently at the grocery store, including on beef and things, and getting more of our dollar out of that. And those plant-based beefs or meat alternatives are still more expensive. They just are. Which is why it's interesting that Beyond Meat is going to try to bring their costs down when it comes to the market, the actual shelf cost for this stuff. We'll see what effect that has. We'll be following that one closely here because I do get the feeling that we are actually making headway and winning the hearts and minds of normal people when it comes to avoiding plant-based meat alternatives. We may never get them to go keto or carnivore, but we're at least going to win that battle. And I think that's a battle worth fighting. But let me know what you thought of this in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore. Thanks for tuning in.